Chapter 21, in which the castle comes down to earth. Abdullah did not need to give Hasruel's question much thought. "You must exile your brother, mighty Jinn, to a place from which he will not return," he said. Dalzell at once burst into melting blue tears. "It's not fair!" He wept and stamped his foot on the throne. "Everyone's always against me! You don't love me, Hasruel! You cheated me! You didn't even try to get rid of those 3 people hanging on to you!" Abdullah was sure Dalzell was right about that. Knowing the power a Jinn had, Abdullah was sure Hasruel could have flung the soldier, not to speak of himself and Flower-in-the-Night, to the ends of the earth if he had wanted to. "It wasn't as if I was doing any harm," Dalzell shouted. "I have a right to get married, don't I?" While he shouted and stamped, Hasruel murmured to Abdullah,
"There is a wandering island in the ocean to the south, which is only to be found once in 100 years. It has a palace and many fruit trees. May I send my brother there?"
"And now you're going to send me away?" Dalzell screamed. "None of you care how lonely I shall be!"
"By the way,"
Hasruel murmured to Abdullah,
"your father's first wife's relatives made a pact with the mercenaries, which allowed them to flee from Zanzib to escape the Sultan's wrath, but they left the 2 nieces behind. The Sultan has locked the unfortunate girls up, they being the nearest of your family he could find."
"Most shocking," Abdullah said. He saw what Hasruel was driving at. "Perhaps, mighty Jinn, you might celebrate your return to goodness by fetching the 2 damsels here." Hasruel's hideous face brightened. He raised his great clawed hand. There was a clap of thunder, followed by some girlish squealing, and the 2 fat nieces stood before the throne. It was as simple as that. Abdullah saw that Hasruel had indeed been holding back his strength before. Looking into the Jinn's great slanting eyes, which still had tears in the corners from the dog's attack, he saw that Hasruel knew he knew. "Not more princesses!" Princess Beatrice said. She was kneeling by Valeria, looking rather harassed. "Nothing of the sort, I assure you," said Abdullah. The 2 nieces could hardly have looked less like princesses. They were in their oldest clothes, practical pink and workday yellow, torn and stained from their experiences, and the hair of both had come unfreezed. They took one look at Dalzell, stamping and weeping above them on the throne, another look at the huge shape of Hasruel, and then a third look at Abdullah, wearing nothing but a loincloth. And they screamed. Then each tried to hide her face in the other's plump shoulder.
"Poor girls,"
stated the Princess of High Norland.
"Hardly royal behavior."
"Dalzell!" Abdullah shouted up at the sobbing Jinn. "Beauteous Dalzell, poacher of princesses, be peaceful a moment, and look upon the gift I have given you to take with you into exile." Dalzell stopped in mid-sob. "Gift?" Abdullah pointed. "Behold, 2 brides, young and succulent, and sorely in need of a bridegroom." Dalzell wiped luminous tears from his cheeks and surveyed the nieces in much the same way that Abdullah's cannier customers used to inspect his carpets. "A matching pair," he said, "and wonderfully fat. Where's the catch? Are they perhaps not yours to give away?" "No catch, shining Jinn," said Abdullah. It seemed to him that, now the girl's other relatives had deserted them, they were surely his to dispose of. But to be on the safe side, he added, "They are yours for the stealing, mighty Dalzell." He went up to the nieces and patted each on her plump arm. "Ladies," he said, "fullest moons of Zanzib, pray, Forgive me that unfortunate vow which prevents me forever from enjoying your largeness. Look up instead, and behold the husband I have found you in my place." The heads of both nieces came up as soon as they heard the word husband. They gazed at Dalzell.
"He's ever so handsome,"
said the pink one.
"I like them with wings,"
said the yellow one.
"It's different." "Fangs are rather sexy,"
mused the pink one.
"So are claws, provided he's careful with them on the carpets."
Dalzell beamed wider with each remark. "I shall steal these at once," he said. "I like them better than princesses. Why didn't I collect fat ladies instead, Hasrael?" A fond smile bared Hasrael's fangs.
It was your decision, brother.
His smile faded.
If you are quite ready, it is my duty to send you into exile now.
"I don't mind so much now," Dalzell said, with eyes still on the two nieces. Hasrael stretched out his hand again, slowly, regretfully, and slowly, in 3 long rolls of thunder, Dalzell and the two nieces faded out of sight. There was a slight smell of the sea and a faint noise of seagulls. Both Morgan and Valeria started crying again. Everyone else sighed, Hasrael deepest of all. Abdullah realized with some surprise that Hasrael truly loved his brother. Although it was hard to understand how anyone could love Dalzell, Abdullah could hardly blame him. "Who am I to criticize?" he thought, as Flower-in-the-Night came up and put her arm through his. Hasrael heaved up an even heavier sigh and sat down on the throne, which fitted his size far better than Dalzell's, with his great wings drooping sadly to either side.
There is other business,
he said, touching his nose gingerly. It seemed to be healing already.
"Yes, there certainly is,"
said Sophie. She had been waiting on the throne steps for her chance to speak.
"When you stole our moving castle, you disappeared my husband, Howl. Where is he? I want him back."
Hasrael raised his head sadly, but before he could reply, there were alarm noises from the princesses. Everyone at the bottom of the steps retreated from the Paragon's petticoat. It was bulging and bellying up and down on its hoops like a concertina. "Help!" cried the genie inside. "Let me out! You promised!" Flower-in-the-Night's hand leaped to her mouth.
"Oh, I clean forgot,"
she said, and darted away from Abdullah, down the steps. She threw aside the petticoat in a roll of purple smoke.
"I wish,"
she cried out,
"that you be released from your bottle, genie, and be free forevermore."
As usual, the genie did not waste time in thanks. The bottle burst with a resounding smack. Inside the rolls of smoke, a decidedly more solid figure climbed to its feet. Sophie gave a scream at the sight.
"Oh, bless the girl! Thank you! Thank you!"
She arrived in the vanishing smoke so fast that she nearly knocked the solid man there over. He did not seem to mind. He picked Sophie up and swung her around and around.
"Oh, why didn't I know? Why didn't I realize?"
Sophie panted, staggering about on broken glass.
Because that was the enchantment,
Hasrael said gloomily.
If he was known to be Wizard Howl, someone would have released him. You could not know who he was, nor could he tell anyone.
The royal Wizard Howl was a younger man than Wizard Suleiman, and a good deal more elegant. He was richly dressed in a suit of mauve satin, against which his hair showed a rather improbable shade of yellow. Abdullah stared at the wizard's light eyes in the wizard's bony face. He had seen those eyes clearly one early morning. He felt he should have guessed. He felt himself altogether in an awkward position. He had used the genie. He felt he knew the genie very well. Did that mean that he also knew the wizard, or not? For this reason, Abdullah did not join in when everyone, including the soldier, gathered around Wizard Howl, exclaiming and congratulating him. He watched the tiny Princess of Safan walk quietly among the exclaiming crowd and gravely put Morgan into Howl's arms. "Thanks," said Howl. "I thought I'd better bring him along where I could keep an eye on him," he explained to Sophie. "Sorry if I gave you a fright." Howl seemed more used to holding babies than Sophie was. He rocked Morgan soothingly and stared at him. Morgan stared, rather balefully, back. "My word, he's ugly," Howl said. "Chip off the old block."
Howl,
said Sophie, but she did not sound angry. "One moment," said Howl. He advanced to the steps of the throne and looked up at Hasruel. "Look here, Jinn," he said. "I've a bone to pick with you. What do you mean by pinching my castle and shutting me up in a bottle?" Hasruel's eyes lit to an angry orange.
Wizard, do you imagine your power is equal to mine?
"No," said Howl. "I just want an explanation." Abdullah found himself admiring the man. Knowing what a coward the genie had been, he had no doubt that Howl was a jelly of terror inside. But he showed no sign of it. He hoisted Morgan over his mauve silk shoulder and glared back at Hasruel.
Very well,
said Hasruel.
My brother ordered me to steal the castle. In this, I had no choice, but Dalzell gave no orders concerning you, except that I ensure you could not steal the castle back again. Had you been a blameless man, I would simply have transported you to the island where my brother is now. But I knew you had been using your wizardry to conquer a neighboring country.
"That's not fair," said Howl. "The king ordered me." He sounded for a moment just like Dalzell, and he must have realized that he did. He stopped. He thought. Then he said ruefully, "I dare say I could have redirected His Majesty's mind if it had occurred to me. You're right. But don't ever let me catch you where I can put you in a bottle. That's all."
"That I might deserve,"
Azrael agreed.
"And I deserve it the more as I took pains to let everyone involved meet with the most fitting fate I could devise."
His eyes slanted toward Abdullah.
"Did I not?"
"Most painfully, great Jinn," Abdullah agreed. "All my dreams came true, not only the pleasant ones." Azrael nodded.
"And now,"
he said,
"I must leave you when I have performed one more small, needful act."
His wings rose, and his hands gestured. Instantly, he was in the midst of a swarm of strange winged shapes. They hovered over his head and around the throne like transparent seahorses, completely silent except for the faint whisper of their whirling wings.
"His angels,"
Princess Beatrice explained to Princess Valeria. Azrael whispered to the winged shapes, and they departed from him as suddenly as they had appeared, to reappear in the same swarm, whispering around Jamal's head. Jamal backed away from them, horrified, but it did no good. The swarm followed him. One after another, the winged shapes went to perch on different parts of Jamal's dog. As each landed, it shrank and disappeared among the hairs of the dog's coat, until only two were left. Abdullah suddenly found these two shapes hovering level with his eyes. He ducked, but the shapes followed. Two small, cold voices spoke in a way that seemed for his ears alone.
"After long thought,"
they said,
"we prefer this shape to that of toads. We think in the light of eternity, and we therefore thank you."
So saying, the two shapes darted away to perch on Jamal's dog, where they, too, shrank and disappeared into the gnarled skin of its ears. Jamal stared at the dog in his arms.
Why am I holding a dog full of angels?
He asked Hasruel.
"They will not harm you or your beast,"
said Hasriel.
They will simply wait for the gold ring to reappear. Tomorrow, I believe you said. You must see that I am naturally anxious to keep track of my life. When my angels find it, they will bring it to me, wherever I am.
He sighed, heavily enough to stir everyone's hair.
And I do not know where I shall be,
he said.
I shall have to find some place of exile in the far deeps. I have been wicked. I cannot again join the ranks of the good jinns.
Oh, come now, great Jinn,
said Flower-in-the-Night.
It was taught to me that goodness is forgiveness. Surely the good jinns will welcome you back.
Hasriel shook his great head.
Intelligent princess, you do not understand.
Abdullah found that he understood Hasriel very well. Perhaps his understanding had something to do with the way he had been less than polite to his father's first wife's relatives.
Hush, love,
he said.
Hasriel means that he enjoyed his wickedness and does not regret it.
It is true,
said Hasriel.
I had more fun these last months than I had in many hundreds of years before that. Dalzell taught me this. Now I must go away, for fear I start having the same fun among the good jinns. If I only knew where to go.
A thought seemed to strike Hal. He coughed. Why not go to another world? He suggested. There are many hundreds of other worlds, you know. Hasriel's wings rose and beat with excitement, whirling the hair and dresses of every princess in the hall.
There are? Where? Show me how I may get to another world.
Hal put Morgan into Sophie's awkward arms and bounded up the steps of the throne. What he showed Hasriel was a matter of a few strange gestures and a nod or so. Hasriel seemed to understand perfectly. He nodded in return. Then he rose from the throne and simply walked away, without another word, across the hall and through the wall, as if it were so much mist. The huge hall suddenly felt empty.
Good riddance,
said Hal.
Did you send him to your world?
Sophie asked.
No way,
said Hal.
They've got enough to worry about there. I sent him in the opposite direction. I took a risk that the castle wouldn't just disappear.
He turned around slowly, staring out at the cloudy reaches of the hall.
It's all still here,
he said.
That means Calcifer must be here somewhere. He's the one who keeps it going.
He gave out a ringing shout.
Calcifer! Where are you?
The Paragon's petticoat once more seemed to take on a life of its own. This time it bowled away, sideways on its hoops, to let the magic carpet float free of it. The carpet shook itself, in rather the same way as Jamal's dog was now doing. Then, to everyone's surprise, it flopped to the floor and began to unravel. Abdullah nearly cried out at the waist. The long thread whirling free was blue and curiously bright, as if the carpet were not made of the usual wool at all. The free thread, darting back and forth across the carpet, rose higher and higher as it grew longer, until it stretched between the high cloudy ceiling and the almost bare canvas it had been woven into. At last, with an impatient flip, the other end tore free from the canvas and shrank upward into the rest, where it spread in a flickering sort of way, and shrank again, and finally spread into a new shape, like an upside-down teardrop, or maybe a flame. This shape came drifting downward, steadily and purposefully. When it was near, Abdullah could see a face on the front of it composed of little purple or green or orange flames. Abdullah shrugged fatalistically. It seemed that he had parted with all those gold pieces to buy a fire demon and not a magic carpet at all. The fire demon spoke, with a purple flickering mouth.
Thank goodness,
it said.
Why didn't someone call my name before? I hurt. Oh, poor Calcifer,
said Sophie.
I didn't know. I'm not speaking to you,
retorted the strange flame-shaped being.
You stuck your claws into me. Nor,
It said as it floated past Hal.
to you either. You let me in for this. It wasn't me that wanted to help the king's army. I'm only speaking to him,
It said, bobbing up beside Abdullah's shoulder. He heard his hair frizzle gently. The flame was hot.
He's the only person who ever tried to flatter me.
Since when, Hal asked acidly,
Have you needed flattery? Since I discovered how nice it is to be told I'm nice,
said Calcifer.
But I don't think you are nice,
said Hal.
Be like that then.
He turned his back on Calcifer with a fling of mauve satin sleeves.
Do you want to be a toad?
Calcifer asked.
You're not the only one who can do toads, you know.
Hal tapped angrily with one mauve-booted foot.
Perhaps, he said, your new friend might ask you to get this castle down where it belongs then.
Abdullah felt a little sad. Hal seemed to be making it plain that he and Abdullah did not know each other. But he took the hint. He bowed.
"O sapphire among sorceress beings," he said, "flame of festivity and candle among carpets, magnificent more by 100 times in your true form than ever you were as treasured tapestry."
"Get on with it," muttered Hal.
"Would you graciously consent to replace this castle on earth?"
Abdullah finished.
"With pleasure,"
said Calcifer. They all felt the castle going down. It went so fast at first that Sophie clutched Hal's arm and a number of princesses cried out, for as Valeria loudly said, a person's stomach got left behind in the sky. It was possible that Calcifer was out of practice after being in the wrong shape for so long. Whatever the reason was, the descent slowed after a minute and became so gentle that everyone hardly noticed it. This was just as well, because as it descended, the castle became noticeably smaller. Everyone was jostled toward everyone else and had to fight for room in which to balance. The walls moved inward, turning from cloudy periphery to plain plaster as they came. The ceiling moved down, and its vaulting turned to large black beams, and a window appeared behind the place where the throne had been. It was shadowy at first. Abdullah turned toward it eagerly, hoping for one more glimpse of the transparent sea with its sunset islands. But by the time the window was a real solid window, there was only sky outside, flooding the cottage-sized room with clear yellow dawn. By this time, Princess was crowded against Princess. Sophie was squashed in a corner, grasping Hal in one arm, and Morgan with the other, and Abdullah found himself squeezed between Flower-in-the-Night and the soldier. The soldier, Abdullah realized, had not said a word in a very long time. In fact, he was behaving decidedly oddly. He had pulled his borrowed veils back over his head and was sitting bowed over on a small stool which had appeared beside the hearth as the castle shrank.
"Are you quite well?"
Abdullah asked him. Perfectly," said the soldier. Even his voice sounded odd. Princess Beatrice pushed her way through to him.
"Ah, there you are,"
she said.
"Whatever is the matter with you? Afraid I'm going to go back on my promise now we're getting back to normal. Is that it?"
No,
said the soldier.
or rather, yes. It'll bother you.
"It will bother me not at all,"
snapped Princess Beatrice.
"When I make a promise, I keep it. Prince Justin can just go to whistle."
But I am Prince Justin,
said the soldier.
"What?"
said Princess Beatrice. Very slowly and sheepishly, the soldier put away his veils and looked up. It was still the same face, with the same blue eyes that were either utterly innocent or deeply dishonest, or both. But it was a smoother and more educated face, A different sort of soldierliness looked out of it.
"That damned djinn enchanted me too," he said. "I remember it now. I was waiting in a wood for the search parties to report back."
He looked rather apologetic.
"We were hunting for Princess Beatrice. You may know. Without much luck. And suddenly my tent blew away, and there was the djinn, squeezing himself in among the trees. 'I'm taking the princess,' he said. 'And since you defeated her country by unfair use of magic, you can be one of the defeated soldiers and see how you like it.' And next thing I knew, I was wandering about on the battlefield, thinking I was a Strangian soldier."
And did you hate it?
Asked Princess Beatrice.
"Well," said the prince, "it was hard, but I sort of got on with it and picked up everything useful I could and made a few plans. I see I shall have to do something for all those defeated soldiers. But—"
A grin that was purely that of the old soldier spread across his face.
"To tell the truth, I enjoyed myself rather a lot wandering through Ingary. I had fun being wicked. I'm like that djinn, really. It's getting back to ruling again that's depressing me."
Well, I can help you there,
said Princess Beatrice.
I know the ropes, after all.
"Really?"
said the prince, and he looked up at her in the same way that as the soldier he had looked at the kitten in his hat. Flower-in-the-Night nudged Abdullah softly and delightedly.
The Prince of Akistan,
she whispered.
No need to fear him.
Shortly after that, the castle came to earth as lightly as a feather. Calcifer, floating against the low beams of the ceiling, announced that he had set it down in the fields outside Kingsbury. And I sent a message to one of Suleiman's mirrors, he said. This seemed to exasperate Hal. So did I, he said angrily. Take a lot on yourself, don't you? Then he got 2 messages, said Sophie. What of it? How stupid, said Hal, and began to laugh. At that, Calcifer sizzled with laughter too, and they seemed to be friends again. Thinking about it, Abdullah could see how Hal felt. He had been bursting with anger all the time he was a genie, and he was still bursting with anger now, with no one except Calcifer to take it out on. Probably Calcifer felt the same. Both of them had magic that was too powerful to risk being angry with ordinary people. Clearly both messages had arrived. Someone beside the window shouted, "Look!" And everyone crowded to it to watch the gates of Kingsbury opening to let the king's coach hasten out behind a squad of soldiers. In fact, it was a procession. The coaches of numerous ambassadors followed the kings, emblazoned with the arms of most of the countries where Hazrael had collected princesses. Hal turned toward Abdullah. I feel I got to know you rather well, he said. They looked at each other awkwardly. Do you know me? Hal asked. Abdullah bowed. At least as well as you know me. That's what I was afraid of, Hal said ruefully. Well, then, I know I can rely on you to do some good fast talking when it's needed. When all those coaches get here, it may be necessary. It was. It was a most confusing time, during the course of which Abdullah grew rather hoarse. But the most confusing part, as far as Abdullah was concerned, was that every single princess, not to speak of Sophie, Hal, and Prince Justin, insisted on telling the king how brave and intelligent Abdullah had been. Abdullah kept wanting to put them right. He had not been brave, just walking on air because Flower-in-the-Night loved him. Prince Justin took Abdullah aside, into one of the many antechambers of the palace.
Accept it, he said. Nobody ever gets praised for the right reasons. Look at me. The Strangians here are all over me because I'm giving money to their old soldiers, and my royal brother is delighted because I've stopped making difficulties about marrying Princess Beatrice.
Everyone thinks I'm a model prince."
"Did you object to marrying her?" asked Abdullah.
"Oh, yes," said the prince. "I hadn't met her then, of course. The king and I had one of our quarrels about it, and I threatened to throw him over the palace roof. When I disappeared, he thought I'd just gone off in a huff for a while.
He hadn't even started to worry. The king was so pleased with his brother and with Abdullah for bringing Valeria and his other royal wizard back that he ordered a magnificent double wedding for the next day. This added a great deal of urgency to the confusion. Hal hurriedly made a strange simulacrum, constructed mostly of parchment, of a king's messenger, which was sent by magic to the Sultan of Zanzib to offer him transport to his daughter's wedding. This simulacrum came back half an hour later, looking decidedly tattered, with the news that the Sultan had a 50-foot stake ready for Abdullah if he ever showed his face in Zanzib again. This being so, Sophie and Hal went and talked to the king. The king created 2 new posts called Ambassadors Extraordinary for the realm of Ingary, and gave those posts to Abdullah and Flower-in-the-Night that same evening. The wedding of the prince and the ambassador made history, for Princess Beatrice and Flower-in-the-Night had 14 princesses each as bridesmaids, and the king himself gave the brides away. Jamal was Abdullah's best man. As he passed Abdullah the wedding ring, he reported in a whisper that the angels had departed earlier this morning, taking Hazrael's life with them.
"And a good thing, too,"
Jamal said.
"Now my poor dog will stop scratching."
Almost the only persons of note who did not attend the wedding were Wizard Suleiman and his wife. This had only indirectly to do with the king's anger. It seemed that Letty had spoken so strong-mindedly to the king when the king wished to arrest Wizard Suleiman that she had gone into labor rather earlier than her time. Wizard Suleiman was afraid to leave her side, but on the very day of the wedding, Letty gave birth to a daughter with no ill effects at all.
"Oh, good,"
said Sophie.
"I knew I was cut out to be an aunt."
The first task of the 2 new ambassadors was to conduct numbers of the kidnapped princesses to their homes. Some of them, like the tiny princess of Safan, lived so far away that their countries had barely been heard of. The ambassadors had instructions to make trading alliances and also to note all other strange places on the way, with a view to later exploration. Hal had talked to the king. Now, for some reason, all Ingary was talking about mapping the globe. Exploring parties were being chosen and trained. What with journeying and pampering princesses and arguing with foreign kings, Abdullah was somehow always too busy to make his confession to Flower-in-the-Night. It always seemed that there would be a more promising moment the next day. But at last, when they were about to arrive in far-distant Safan, he realized that he could delay no longer. He took a deep breath. He felt the color leave his face. "I am not really a prince," he blurted out. There. It was said. Flower-in-the-Night looked up from the map she was drawing. The shaded lamp in the tent made her face almost more beautiful than usual.
"Oh, I know that,"
she said.
"What?"
whispered Abdullah.
"Well, naturally, while I was in the castle in the air, I had plenty of time to think about you,"
she said.
"And I soon realized you were romancing because it was so like my daydream, only the other way around. I used to dream that I was just an ordinary girl, you see, and that my father was a carpet merchant in the bazaar. I used to imagine that I managed the business for him."
"You are a marvel," said Abdullah.
"Then so are you,"
she said, and went back to her map. They returned to Ingary in due time, with an extra pack horse loaded with the boxes of sweets the princesses had promised Valeria. There were chocolates and candied oranges and coconut ices and honeyed nuts, but the most wonderful of all were the sweets from the tiny princess. layer upon layer of paper-thin candy that the tiny princess called summer leaves. These came in a box so beautiful that Valeria used it for jewelry when she grew older. Strangely enough, she had almost given up screaming. The king could not understand it, but as Valeria explained to Sophie, when 30 people all tell you you've got to scream, it rather puts you off the whole idea. Sophie and Hal were living, somewhat quarrelsomely, it must be confessed, although they were said to be happiest that way, in the moving castle again. One of its aspects was a fine mansion in the Chipping Valley. When Abdullah and Flower-in-the-Night returned, the king gave them land in the Chipping Valley too, and permission to build a palace there. The house they had built was quite modest. It even had a thatched roof. But their gardens soon became one of the wonders of the land. It was said that Abdullah had help in their design from at least one of the royal wizards. For how else could even an ambassador have a bluebell wood that grew bluebells all the year around?